The garden is quiet in the cool of the day. A breeze is moving through the trees. The light is going gold. And somewhere among the leaves, a man and a woman are crouched behind a tree trunk, hands over their mouths, listening. They hear footsteps. They hear a voice. They have heard 1,000 times before, walking, calling, looking, and then the voice says one word, Ayeka. In English, we translate it, "Where are you?" But the Hebrew is closer to something a parent says when the house has gone too quiet. A small, intimate word, almost mournful. Where have you gone from me? Here is the part most people miss. The God who is asking already knows. He knows the tree. He knows the leaves. He knows the man's pulse. And he asks anyway. This is the first question in the Bible, and it is asked by God. To a man hiding behind a fig leaf in a garden God himself planted. It will not be the last time. Across the next 3,000 years of recorded scripture, the God of the universe will ask hundreds of questions. He will ask them in deserts and on mountaintops. He will ask them from a whirlwind and from a still, small voice and from a charcoal fire on a Galilean beach at dawn. He will ask a murderer where his brother is. He will ask a pregnant runaway where she is going. He will ask an 80-year-old shepherd what he is holding in his hand. And every time, he already knows. This is not a story about a question. This is not a story about a verse. This is not a story about a garden. This is a story about every time the God of the universe leaned down to a hiding heart and asked something he did not need to ask. Because here is what we are going to discover together in the next 25 minutes. God's questions in the Bible are not interrogations. They are doorways. They are mirrors. They are invitations spoken in the grammar of grace. And there is one question in particular asked by Jesus to a Galilean fisherman 3 times in a row by a charcoal fire on a beach that grieved the fisherman so deeply he could not answer it the same way twice. We will get to that question, but not yet. First, we need to understand the pattern. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will never read another question of God's the same way again. Here's what most people miss. The first man to hear God's question runs away from it. His name is Adam, and he is hiding. The next man to hear a question from God will not hide. He will lie. His name is Cain. You probably know the broad strokes of this story. 2 brothers, 2 offerings. One accepted, one rejected. Cain takes his brother Abel into a field, and what happens in that field is the first murder in human history. The blood of a brother soaks into the dirt of a world only a few chapters old. And then God shows up. He does not arrive with thunder. He arrives with a question. Where is Abel, your brother? Stop and feel the weight of that for a second. God is the one who told Cain his offering was rejected. God is the one who warned Cain that sin was crouching at his door. God watched the whole thing. He saw the field. He heard the cry. He knows exactly where Abel is. The blood is in the words of the next verse, crying out to him from the ground. And he asks anyway. This is the pattern beginning to show itself. The question is never for the God who asks it. The question is always for the heart being asked. Cain hears the question, and Cain does what every cornered human being has done since Eden. He answers a different question. Am I my brother's keeper? He says. It is one of the most quoted lines in the Old Testament, and it is a deflection. A door slammed shut. God opened the door. Cain refused to walk through it. But it gets stranger. A few chapters later, the same God shows up at a desert spring, on a road called Shur. And this time the person he asks is not a murderer. She is a teenage Egyptian servant girl. She is pregnant. She is alone, and she is running. Her name is Hagar. The story is one most pulpits skip. Sarah, the matriarch of Israel, has given her servant girl to her husband Abraham as a kind of surrogate. Hagar conceives. Sarah grows jealous. Sarah is cruel. And one day Hagar takes whatever water she can carry, and she walks out into the wilderness alone on a road heading back toward Egypt, toward the only home she ever knew, before being trafficked into a stranger's tent. She stops at a spring. The sun is brutal. She has no plan. She is 16 years old, maybe carrying a child who will be called Ishmael. And the angel of the Lord finds her. He does not lecture her. He does not rescue her. He asks her 2 questions. Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from? Where are you going? Pay attention to this. He calls her by name. He calls her by relationship. And he asks her the 2 questions every running human being needs to hear. Where have you come from? Where are you going? Hagar answers honestly, I am running from my mistress. And then God speaks tenderly to a runaway slave girl. He promises her a son. He promises her a future. And Hagar does something no other person in the Old Testament does. She gives God a name. El Roi. The Hebrew is gentle in your mouth. El God. Roi sees me. The God who sees me. A pregnant teenager at a desert spring named God before any prophet, any patriarch, any king ever did. Because the question gave her a doorway, and she walked through it. The pattern is building. The first question of God reaches a man hiding behind a leaf. The second reaches a man with blood on his hands. The third reaches a runaway girl at a spring. And the fourth reaches an 80-year-old shepherd in the middle of nowhere. His name is Moses. You know his story too, though you probably know the Hollywood version. The basket in the river, the palace in Egypt, the prince who killed a man and ran. What we forget is what happens next. Moses spent 40 years in Midian. 40. He married a foreign woman. He raised foreign children. He herded somebody else's sheep on the backside of a desert. And by the time God shows up in a burning bush, Moses is not the action hero of Exodus. Moses is an old man who has stopped expecting anything important to happen to him ever again. God says he is sending him back to Egypt. Moses panics. He gives God 5 excuses in a row. He is not eloquent. He does not know what to say. The people will not believe him. He cannot speak well. Send somebody else. And in the middle of the excuses, God asks him a question. What is that in your hand? Read it slowly. God did not need to ask. He saw the staff. He had watched Moses lean on that piece of wood for 40 years. He knew its splinters. He knew its weight. He had counted every time Moses used it to crack a stone or shove a stubborn ram. He asks anyway, because the question is not for God. The question is for Moses. Moses looks at his own hand for the first time in 40 years. A staff, he says. Just a staff. Throw it down, says God. Moses throws it down. The staff becomes a serpent. Moses runs from it. God tells him to pick it up by the tail. He does, and in his hand the same plain piece of shepherd's wood becomes by the next chapter the rod that will split the Red Sea down the middle. That is the pattern. A man hiding, a murderer lying, a teenage girl running, an old shepherd making excuses. And every one of them gets the same thing. Not a verdict, a question, a doorway, a mirror held up gently enough that they can finally look into it. The questions are not interrogations. The questions are invitations. And the pattern is about to get much bigger than a garden, a desert, and a stick. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Has God ever asked you a question you did not want to answer? Not out loud, not in a thunderclap. Just the quiet kind, the one that shows up in the middle of the night, or in the middle of a song at church, or in the middle of a conversation you did not see coming. The kind that finds you the way the question found Adam behind the tree, the way it found Hagar at the spring. If this video is meeting you somewhere right now, the next part is for you, because the pattern is about to take on a face. But before God's question takes on a face, it takes on a whisper. A man is curled up at the back of a cave. His name is Elijah, and 3 days ago he was on top of Mount Carmel calling down fire from heaven. He had just defeated 450 prophets of Baal in front of the king of Israel. He had run faster than the king's chariot. He was the most famous man in the country. Now a queen named Jezebel has sent him a message. By tomorrow at this time, she says, you will be dead. And Elijah, the same man who stood unflinching before fire from the sky, runs. He runs for 40 days. He runs all the way south to Mount Horeb, the mountain where Moses once saw the burning bush. He finds a cave. He crawls inside. He is exhausted. He is suicidal. He is done. And God shows up in 3 things Elijah expected. A great and strong wind tears the mountains apart. The Lord was not in the wind. An earthquake shakes the rocks loose. The Lord was not in the earthquake. A fire sweeps across the slopes. The Lord was not in the fire. And then comes a sound the old Hebrew calls kol demama daka. Most English Bibles translate it, a still small voice. A more literal rendering is something closer to the sound of a thin silence, a whisper. And the whisper asks Elijah a question. What are you doing here, Elijah? Here is the part nobody tells you. Elijah gives the rehearsed answer, the one he has been rehearsing in his head for 40 days of running. I have been very zealous for the Lord. The Israelites have forsaken your covenant. I am left. It is the answer of a tired man performing his exhaustion. And God does not argue. God does not correct him. God does something stranger. He tells Elijah to go stand on the mountain. And then, after the wind, after the earthquake, after the fire, after the whisper, God asks the exact same question a second time. What are you doing here? Elijah, word for word, identical, because the first answer was the rehearsed answer. And God knew. He always knows. He asked twice so that Elijah could hear his own answer and finally maybe say a truer one. Augustine of Hippo, writing his Confessions in the late 4th century, said that every human being is forever being asked God's first question. Where are you? In some new form, in some new hour of hiding. Elijah's hour of hiding had a cave and a whisper. Yours might have a couch and a phone screen, but the question is the same. The pattern is escalating, and it is about to escalate from a whisper to a whirlwind. A man named Job has lost everything. In a single day, raiders steal his livestock. Fire from heaven kills his sheep. A windstorm collapses the house his 10 children are gathered inside. All 10 of them die. Job tears his clothes. He shaves his head. He sits down in ashes. And then he gets sick. Boils from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. His 3 best friends sit silently with him for 7 days and then start talking. and they are wrong about almost everything they say. For 37 chapters, Job demands an audience with God. He wants answers. He wants explanation. He wants a courtroom and a transcript. In chapter 38, God finally answers. He answers out of a whirlwind, and he does not give Job a single answer. He gives Job 64 questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Have you ever commanded the morning? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? And on, and on. For 4 chapters. Stay with this. Job came demanding answers. God answered with interrogation. But the strange thing is, when God is finished, Job is not crushed. Job is healed because the questions did what no explanation could have done. They put Job in his place. And his place, it turns out, was not the courtroom. His place was the presence of God. Job stops asking why, not because he was bullied into silence, but because the questions ushered him into something bigger than his grief. He says, and this is one of the most quietly devastating verses in the Old Testament, I have heard of you with the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. The questions did not give Job an answer. The questions gave Job a God, and this is where it gets remarkable. Because the next person God asks a question to, also through a kind of grief refuses to be moved by it. His name is Jonah. He is a prophet from a small Galilean town called Gath-Hepher. He has just watched the city of Nineveh, the capital of the empire that will one day destroy his country, repent and turn to God. After a single sermon he did not want to preach, Jonah is furious. He walks out of Nineveh. He sits down on a hill east of the city. He builds himself a little shelter. God grows a plant up over him to give him shade. Jonah is, for one verse, exceedingly glad. The next day, God sends a worm that kills the plant. And God asks him a question. Do you do well to be angry for the plant? That is how the book of Jonah ends, with a question. No answer, no resolution. Just God asking a sulking prophet whether his anger over a dead plant is more than his compassion for 120,000 people who did not know their right hand from their left. The book ends, and the question hangs there, unanswered, because the question was never for Jonah. The question was for you. 2,000 years after Eden, the question takes on a face. A man is walking through a colonnade in Jerusalem. The colonnade is called Bethesda, which means House of Mercy. There are 5 porches, and underneath the porches there is a pool, and around the pool there are bodies, blind, lame, paralyzed. Some of them have been there for years. Some of them have been there for decades. The man walking through the porches is the Son of God, and he stops in front of one of the bodies. The man on the mat has been lame for 38 years. Jesus does not say, I will heal you. Jesus does not say, be made whole. Jesus asks him a question. Do you want to be made whole? It sounds on first reading like the gentlest question in the New Testament. But sit with it for a second. 38 years is longer than most people in that pool had been alive. 38 years is long enough for a person to build a life around a wound, to build an identity, to build a routine, to build a way of asking for coins by a pool in the middle of Jerusalem. The man does not answer. Yes, the man answers with an excuse. Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool. The question was a mirror. The man looked into it, and what he saw was that some part of him had stopped wanting to be made whole. A few miles north in a town called Bethany, the question takes on a different weight. A man named Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. His sister Martha runs out to meet Jesus on the road before he reaches the tomb. She is grieving. She is angry. She says the line, "Every mourner has said in some form since the beginning of time, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.'" Jesus does not defend himself. He does not explain his timing. He says 7 words that the Christian church has been carrying for 2,000 years. "I am the resurrection and the life." And then he turns to a woman whose brother is rotting in a tomb 30 yards away, and he asks her a question. "Do you believe this?" That is the entire gospel in 3 words. Not, "Do you understand this?" Not, "Can you explain this?" "Do you believe this?" Martha does. And inside the hour, her brother walks out of a tomb, wrapped in his own grave clothes. And this is where it gets remarkable. Imagine for a second a kitchen. A child is standing on a chair beside the open cookie jar. There are crumbs on the child's face. There are crumbs on the floor. The parent walks in. The parent already knows. The parent can see. The parent does not need to ask anything. But the parent does ask, gently, "What are you doing?" Not because the parent is gathering information. The parent is offering the child a doorway, a way to come down from the chair, a way to say "I am sorry" with their own mouth, a way to come back into the room. That is every question God has ever asked in the Bible. He is not interrogating. He is opening a door. And there is one last door he opens, the one we have been waiting for. A charcoal fire is burning on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. The Greek word for charcoal fire is anthrakia. It appears only twice in the entire New Testament. Once in the 18th chapter of John, when Peter stands warming his hands by a charcoal fire in the courtyard of the high priest, and denies Jesus 3 times. And once here, on a beach, after the resurrection, with breakfast cooking, with Peter walking up the sand. The smell of the second charcoal fire would have been identical to the smell of the first. Peter would have known. John Chrysostom, preaching in Antioch in the late 4th century, said this was the mercy of Christ, that the restoration would happen at the exact kind of fire where the denial happened. Jesus asks Peter a question. "Simon, son of Jonas, do you love me?" He asks it 3 times. There is a word play in the Greek that most English Bibles flatten. The first 2 times Jesus uses the word agapao, the sacrificial all-in love. Peter cannot bring himself to say agapao. Peter answers with the word phileo, the warmer brotherly word. "Lord, you know I phileo you." The 3rd time, Jesus comes down to Peter's word. He asks Simon, "Son of Jonas, do you phileo me?" And Peter is grieved, not because Jesus asked 3 times. Peter is grieved because Jesus stooped to the only word Peter could honestly say. Origen of Alexandria, writing in the 3rd century, said this was the gentleness of the Master. Meeting his disciple at the level of love the disciple could profess. This is not a story about 3 questions. This is not a story about 3 denials. This is not a story about a fish breakfast on a Galilean beach at dawn. This is a story about a God who comes to the exact location of your failure and asks a question gentle enough to let you answer it. Eusebius of Caesarea recorded that decades later, Peter was crucified in Rome upside down by his own request, considering himself unworthy to die in the same posture as his Lord. The question on the beach had taken root. So here is what to take away from 25 minutes inside the questions of God. First, every question God has ever asked from the Garden of Eden to a Galilean beach at dawn was asked by a God who already knew the answer. He did not need the information. He never needs the information. The pattern is the same from Genesis to John. The question is never the interrogation. Second, the question is the doorway. God asks because he wants the hiding heart to walk back into the room on its own 2 feet. He asked Cain so Cain could confess. He asked Hagar so Hagar could name him. He asked Moses so Moses could see what he was already holding. He asked Elijah twice so that the second answer could be the true one. He asked Peter 3 times so that the third yes could heal what 3 denials had broken. The question always opens a door. What you do at the door is yours. And third, somewhere in your life right now, there is a question God is asking you. It might be the loud kind. It is more likely the quiet kind. It might sound like, "What are you doing here?" It might sound like, "Do you want to be made whole?" It might sound like, "Do you love me?" It might sound, if you sit still long enough, exactly like the first one. "Where are you?" He already knows. He is asking anyway, because he wants you to say it out loud. Which question in this video found you the hardest? Which one are you sitting with right now? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. 2,000 years ago, on a beach by the Sea of Galilee, the same voice that called through the Garden of Eden called across a charcoal fire. He is still calling. Ayeka, where are you?